Are you having fun? You know, I say that because one of the times I was giving a talk to some priests, and I started my talk by just simply saying, "Are you having fun?" And they all kind of looked at me and frowned. And the reason I said that was I was watching television one day when I was just doing some priest work, and on the television, a fellow was talking about business and how some people are more successful than others. And the fellow said, "Well, how come some are more successful?" He said, "Well, I'm going to tell you a story about why that happens." He said, "See, this gentleman owned this business and the building, and one day there was something went wrong and it collapsed, and the building collapsed on everybody. Well, the owner, he ran out there and he just started pulling all the bricks away, and finally when he found everybody, he said, 'Hey, are you guys having fun?' And I, honest to God, I jumped out of the chair and I said, 'Whoa, that's the whole secret. Are you having fun?' Now, that doesn't mean you got to be partying. But I said to these priests that I was talking to, I said, do you really enjoy what you're doing? Do you enjoy being a priest? Do you enjoy being with people? Do you enjoy celebrating Eucharist? And if you're married, do you really enjoy being friends with each other? I mean, you can go on and on and on. So I said, that's the whole, you got to be having fun. So I'm glad you're having fun. I said at the beginning that stories are prayers. And I really mean this, listening to, yourselves and Bobby and I'm sorry, your first name again? Charlie, Bobby and Charlie. You got to say to yourself, wow, music, song is all prayer. I mean, I can tell you just myself sitting there, all of a sudden, like you Danny boy. I mean, there's lots of reasons why that just breaks me up inside. When you start to think about a young man going into the military like some of us have, dads and mothers and sons and whatever. And that one song you had when you did your arms out and your hands, man, I could give you a presentation for an hour just about what I believe your hands are. Pray your hands. Pray your hands. You know what Monica said to her son, Augustine? She said, Augustine, when Augustine wasn't believing, she said, Augustine, look at your hands. And she said, when you know your hands, you'll start to know God. And when you know God, you'll start to love God. And when you love God, then you'll start to understand and love Augustine. Our hands do everything. So I always tell people, please pray for your hands. So I hope we're having fun. Just a little story that we just popped in my mind when we were talking. A fun story, I guess. And maybe it's a story somehow because I'm going to look in the mirror myself. Age gets to a certain point. Well, anyway, this very elderly nun, was getting close to going to God. And the young nuns were taking good care of her. And they would give her a nice glass of milk every night, before she would fall asleep. Well, one of the young nuns said, I think we ought to put a little Irish whiskey, in the milk, to really make her go. So finally, a day came when Mother Superior was about ready to go. She gathered all the young nuns around her, and the young nun said, Sister, Mother Superior, can you give us any thoughts, and any advice? She said, yes. She said, whatever you do when I'm gone, please don't sell the cow. My son, who will take my son? Jonathan was filled with rage as he watched from afar after the threefold execution at the place of the skull. He despised the Romans before, but now it would turn into hatred. He didn't know the figure in the center, but he knew the other two very, very well. Dismas on the right, Justus on the left. Dismas was his dearest friend, and it was only really by chance that Jonathan himself was not being crucified. That's why he stood way in the back to hide. He hoped nobody would recognize him. See, Dismas and Justus, they were no ordinary criminals. They were revolutionaries. They called them patriots, zealots. They were secretly undermining the Roman authority. Did a pretty good job. They would raid the Roman supply trains en route to Jericho, almost living the history of the Maccabees 2 centuries before. Jonathan didn't know Justice too much. He was a new member. Seemed very violent, thrived on murder and bloodshed. A little too violent for Jonathan. Dismas, he was so different. He and Dismas grew up together in the village of Bethany. They actually had a common ancient grandfather, one of the last survivors of the Jewish state, which Pompey destroyed 90 years before. They were taught about the Torah and the history of their country. They learned to want to share the same fanaticism of Judas Maccabeus. Jonathan and Dismas were strict Pharisees, proud of their religion. Very few had the courage to join them, so they went underground, sabotaging the Romans in every way possible. The most effective way was to attack the supply train. Doing so would provide them with food, weapons. A few weeks ago, the Romans sent a group of soldiers designed as slaves. A skirmish occurred. Actually, 7 of the group were killed. Dismas and Justice were arrested. Jonathan and a few others escaped. So here they were, his friends on the cross, looking at him from afar. Jonathan, though, wondered at the person, who was he in the middle? The title is hung over his head, carrying the charge, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Must have been a joke. Maybe he was a member of another band of patriots. Because you know what? There were dozens of them. This man seemed different. Jonathan wondered about him. Why was he so silent while the others were screaming? How could he endure that pain? Both of his friends finally turned to the one in the middle. They cursed him. They cursed him as well. Jonathan could not understand that. Justice continued screaming, "If you're the Messiah, then why the hell don't you get the 3 of us out of here?" And he laughed. Jonathan was ashamed. He hoped that the bystanders didn't think they were all like that. Justice had a terrible foul tongue. All of a sudden, Dismas cried out to Justice, almost speaking what was in Jonathan's heart. "Don't you feel God? We suffer here together, receive the just rewards for our deeds. But this one, he's done nothing wrong. Leave him alone. Isn't there any decency in you?" Dismas not only had physical courage, he seemed to have a moral courage also. What a beautiful person. No surprise to Jonathan. Dismas turned to the man whom someone had called Jesus. Jonathan had to creep closer. He wanted to know what was going on. He saw his friend's courage. Actually, he found himself at the very foot of the cross. Dismas' eyes caught the eyes of Jesus. Almost seemed like a strange light began to shine on his face as he looked at the man on the cross. "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingly power." Seem like some of the greatest revelations are born in suffering, aren't they? It dawned on Dismas like a great light. This man was the Messiah. He realized his was a different kingdom than they had sought. He and his friends fought the wrong kind of goal. It was through suffering and courage and persistent love that the real kingdom would come. Hate and vengeance would only delay its coming. It's not too late to change. Others could change. Dismas then saw Jonathan. He seemed to nod at him. It was strange how the love was awakened in both Dismas and Jonathan at the same time. One on the cross and the other at the foot of the cross. Jonathan would never forget that moment. Words spoken by Dismas. And all of a sudden this man, Jesus, looked at Dismas. "Truly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." Spoken with such conviction. This man knew paradise. A great burden was lifted from Jonathan. His friend would be safe beyond the threats of torture. He was blessed. Jonathan sensed that the world had to discover a better way than violence. There was indeed a paradise. Peace and hope crept into Jonathan's heart. Peace and victory, even in that place of death. His attitude toward the Romans seemed to change as well. Jonathan slowly looked around, and his eyes caught the eyes of the Roman soldier Claudius. Genuine compassion swept over him. These Romans, shouldn't they be hated? They were caught, just as Jonathan and Dismas and the others were caught up. Jonathan and Dismas were among the first to discover the miraculous power of the cross in transforming hatred to the understanding and strength of love. One in the death throes of his life, and the other, the whole life to change. Bitterness and hatred were washed from both of them, for they knew that hate robbed them of their freedom. Jonathan, he lingered even after the bodies were taken down. For the first time in his life, he spoke to a Roman soldier without contempt. He found Claudius to be moved as he was. Jonathan was no longer afraid. Amazing. This Roman centurion told his story, and Jonathan told his. And guess what? They embraced before the cross. They shared the peace of God. And then Jonathan saw this. He brought the Roman soldier with him as he moved toward the others. The two became companions. Claudius, the Roman executioner, became a companion of a Jewish revolutionary. Nothing is impossible at the still point where the love of God meets. Nothing is impossible at the still point where the love of God meets. My son, who will take my son? Jonathan did. Claudius did. To me, Jonathan and my story is an icon of the last 4 Beatitudes. Blessed are the merciful. I think it was my second year of high school that we were to read The Merchant of Venice. Thank God there were comic books like that or something. But I do remember, mercy is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It's an attribute of God himself. So wrote Shakespeare. We are asked to lead a righteous life. But self-righteousness, as we all know, is only a breath away. How easy, isn't it, to list the sins that I have not committed, to catalog sins of others, to praise my own good deeds. Remember the Pharisee, thank God that he wasn't like others. You know, those adulterers, thieves, and all the like. Or like the tax collector, who was just sitting in the back of the church or the temple. The tax collector is the seed for Jesus' prayer. A great prayer, my dear friends. I hope you say it once, twice, maybe 1,000 times. The Jesus prayer.